Once you move up a size point from the starter ships in Star Citizen, you start to enter the realm of versatile platform ships, the sort that let you do a few different things, whether that's mixing solo gameplay with the option to bring another person or two on board, or perhaps just stepping up the cargo storage or combat performance. And it's in this arena that the C1 Spirit vies for your attention, seeking to compete with the likes of the Cutlass or Freelancer series. So how well does it manage to do that? I'm Forrester, and in this video we'll explore the answer to that question by reviewing the currently flyable Crusader Industries C1 Spirit, which is described on the Star Citizen website as a medium freight ship. If you've seen other reviews on this channel, then you probably know what to expect, with this video following the usual format. It's split into 5 sections, starting with a ship tour, assessing combat performance, reviewing handling and visibility, looking at the operating costs before finally summarising. As always, I've included timestamps in the video description in case you want to skip ahead. And if you're one of the many people watching who isn't yet subscribed to the channel, you might consider it so you can be notified of future Star Citizen videos as they go live. And we'll start the tour of the C1 by approaching the rear access ramp from the rear. There's a button which deploys the ramp, and a small red light that shows as the ramp is deploying, which goes firm as it's deployed. The ramp is really convenient for driving up ground vehicles. There's a button to close the rear ramp door right by the inside exit. Within the rearmost section of the C1 Spirit is some component access. There are small buttons which show the components that are tucked away inside. There's also a cargo section door which allows you to isolate the cargo segment of the Spirit. When in use, quite often this door will remain open. This next room is the main cargo body of the ship. On each side there is 32 SCU of storage, with the walkway in the centre remaining clear. At the front of this section there's another airlocked room. This also houses some component access. And then moving forward to the front section of the Spirit is this habitation/flight section. On the right or starboard side is a small bathroom area, number 1s only, and this doubles up as a shower. There's a small kitchen area, and on either side a bed with a storage locker above it. On the left or port side is storage for a suit and a weapons rack. And right at the front is both a pilot and co-pilot seat, which, like other Crusader Industries ships, is on a set of rails which brings you forward to the console. Underneath the ship externally on the left or port side is a small fuel port. It's not currently functional in-game, but is a nice little decoration. The C1 Spirit comes armed with 4 size 3 weapons, 2 on a turret below the nose capable of gimballing around to some extent, and 2 fixed to mounts on the top of each wing. The mount does support swapping to gimbals, albeit at the expense of reducing to size 2. all of the default weapons are M5A laser cannons. The C1 is further armed with 4 size 3 missiles, which are fairly chunky. The mounts could be swapped to carry 2 size 4 missiles, all the way down to potentially 16 size 1 missiles. Defensively, the C1 carries a single size 2 shield generator, which puts it on a par with the Cutlass Black, but a little more vulnerable than the Freelancer, which carries 2. And don't be surprised if these sort of Cutlass and Freelancer comparisons keep cropping up. Altogether, the C1 does okay in a combat scenario. All of the weapons are pilot controlled, so there's no reliance on another crewmate, and the ship, whilst not as nimble as a dedicated fighter, is fairly readily able to turn on target, especially against NPCs. Against heavier hitting targets, the shields won't last too long, but then the Spirit is more of a cargo ship than a combat ship, so perhaps that's appropriate. It's worth noting that all of the weapons fire forward, more or less, so unlike perhaps the Cutlass or Freelancer with their manned turrets giving extra coverage, the C1 does need to be facing the target in order to engage. Visibility in the C1 is fairly good. For both pilot and co-pilot, there is clear cockpit glass out to the front, sides and above, and the cockpit is located right at the front of the ship, which makes it easier to know where to look. The central console does curtail visibility below a little, but it's not too bad, especially since the profile of the C1 vertically is fairly skinny anyway. The SCM speed of 154 meters per second is fairly comparable to the other ships at this size, and the top speed of 1120 meters per second does narrowly extend beyond the Cutlass Black. But the difference isn't so much in the numbers, it's more in the feel of how the Spirit flies, which is pleasantly well for a ship capable of hauling 64 SCU of cargo. There can be a little drifting between turns, but it feels natural and manageable, and the thrusters at the back are very responsive to a little burst of thrust should that be required. The stock quantum drive is actually fairly quick, and also has a good range within the Stanton system, making the Spirit a good choice for crossing longer distances. Depending on what you've been doing with your Spirit, you might expect the more regular costs like repair, rearming and refueling to be somewhere in the low thousands of Alpha UEC. If you're cargo trading, you might need a little bit more working capital than that, just for buying the cargo before you sell it, and clearly that's potentially at risk whilst you do so. That said, the 64 SCU of storage aboard is enough to make some modest profits through cargo trading if that's your bag. Other options are available for the Spirit, like some of the lower end combat contracts like box delivery missions, and the C1 handles those okay. But some of the more interesting options for this ship lie in how it pairs with other things. For example, loading a rock mining rover on the back and selling some glorious Hadanite, or the 64 SCU neatly aligning to about 2 Prospector runs of refined ore, with the Prospector a fairly cheap rental option, or linking up with a salvage ship to load aboard excess RMC or cargo directly from a derelict ship, potentially using the onboard tractor beam. The C1 is potentially a very interesting team player. By way of loadout changes, the stock components do a pretty good job. Perhaps some pilots would swap out the weapons for their preference, like maybe adding gimbals to the wing mounts and maybe changing the laser cannons to repeaters, for example. The C1 Spirit looks fantastic, aesthetically speaking, both inside and out, and in a variety of lighting conditions. The lights aboard give a sense of identity as well as some utility, with the rear cargo ramp light showing where the ramp will sit, as well as a warning for when it is opening and closing. The reclaim timer is fairly low at 6 minutes and 45 seconds, and even with a default loadout, the ship performs very well, with a strong quantum range and speed as stock. Whilst there is a seat for a second crew person, it's more to bring someone along for the ride rather than for serious gameplay, unless perhaps you have a plan that involves the tractor beam turret. The key strength of the Spirit is that the ship is versatile, able to haul cargo, load boxes, load ground vehicles, all either through the in-game systems or potentially through use of the onboard tractor beam. The C1 is fairly easy to fly, and the cargo is held securely within the walls of the ship. While some players have criticised the wasted potential cargo space aboard, for example in the walkway between boxes, it seems that's probably a more deliberate choice for safety and practicality reasons of operating the ship. There are some drawbacks, however. Whilst having the tractor beam aboard is pretty neat in concept, in reality, the lack of some of the finer controls means it's often quite clumsy and clunky to use. Whilst not quite as long a route as on the Mercury Star Runner, players do have to do the dance of doors to get all the way to the cockpit, although in theory that might mean that the Spirit in future is a good choice for airlockable spaces. Additionally, carrying a rock mining rover aboard, pilots need to be careful not to lock the mining arm in place lest the whole rover end up stuck behind the door in the cargo hold. With all that, it seems logical to next consider price. The C1 Spirit comes in at $125 for purchase price, a little less perhaps for a Warbond edition, which puts it just above the price point for the Freelancer and Cutlass, which share much of the same functionality of the Spirit. The small premium is largely for either extra cargo space versus the Cutlass Black, arguably better solo performance than the Freelancer, and perhaps a nicer aesthetic than both depending on your preference. The C1 could conceivably be used as a big versatile starter ship, albeit at a much more expensive price point than the base models, and that's without the price of a game package factored in. There's no in-game price yet for the C1 Spirit at time of recording, but potentially this could be a very interesting stepping stone ship for players moving on to their second ship from their starter ship, especially if it comes in around the 1.5 million Alpha UEC mark. It's certainly been a fun little ship to fly around at an interesting size with a lot to offer, and may even feature in my personal hangar going forward, owing to the ease of use, fast deployment, and general utility. But do you agree? There seem to be a lot of passionate people both for and against the C1, so I'll be interested to read your thoughts in the video comments. If you enjoyed this video, you might press that like button to help me understand what videos to make more of in future, and if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, you might like to do that too, so that YouTube knows to show you more videos like this in the future. But otherwise, and as always, thank you for watching.